my case study is about Drummond, actually an American company. According to Forbes, is one of the largest American privately held companies, and they have huge operation in Colombia. Their main operation is coal mining there, but recently they discovered huge gas fields in Colombia. So they started with gas operations, or gas exploration actually, which is new for them, and the method they use, fracking, you might heard of that, is as well new in Colombia. So everything is new. It means there's a lot of uncertainty in that project. So they discovered for themselves two major problems. The first one was that the critical information was not in the place where it was supposed to be, which led, for example, to delays in environmental permits, etc., which basically delayed the exploration, which is very expensive. Okay, and the other thing they figured out, they had collaboration problems and communication problems. So there were distributed teams. They had office in Bogota, another office in Valledupar, which is a small town close to the actual gas field, and the operation on the field. So it looked like these teams were not working very well together. So I actually gave them some time ago a Spanish copy of Jeff's book, and then they came back and asked me, well, do you think we could use Scrum to fix that? And I said, yes, I think so, but where do we start? Okay. Why the question, where do we start? Well, in software we have high uncertainty, but the cost of change in software is very low. So if you make a mistake, it's not too expensive. Now, if you're drilling gas wells, that can cost $2, $3, $4 million. So the cost of change, or the cost of making a mistake, is really high. So that's why they usually most of the time use something which is called front-end loading as a method they use to manage their project. So I was thinking, okay, how can we start with Scrum? Or better, where can we start to use Scrum? So we had to look for a place where uncertainty was high, which is certainly the case in that situation, but cost of change was low. And before Scrum, I was working in traditional project management. So I remembered, actually, there's something that almost all projects have in common. At the beginning of every project, the cost of change is low and uncertainty is high. And at the end of every project, the cost of change is high and uncertainty is low. So why not just look at the beginning of the project to start with? So looking at that in oil and gas, before you start drilling, all these geological processes are not so expensive. The drilling itself is expensive, but all the processes before that are not so expensive. They are expensive, but comparably low. So we were thinking, okay, let's start there. So how we did that? That's actually the Caporo gas field. So at the beginning, we established a clear vision, the exploration of the Caporo gas field, which is one of the biggest gas fields in Colombia. Okay. Then we said, okay, we start at the top. We implemented an executive action team, even though we just call it the executive team. We trained them in Scrum. The product owner, or the vice president, became the product owner. We had only one backlog, which is a prioritized backlog. Sprints are 2 weeks, and I think the most important part was this executive team, and this executive team meeting each day for 15 minutes. All the problems they had with communication, impediments, critical information before, they could resolve now literally in hours, because they were talking every day about what's going on, so that stuff surfaced really fast. They implemented all Scrum elements. The only thing they struggled with was backlog refinement, but I'll talk about that later. And for the remote teams, they used a pretty sophisticated video conference hardware and software. So even though they were not co-located, they tried their best to communicate. That's what they were doing. Now here the result. Okay, the fastest well they have ever drilled before took them 10 days. Now if you imagine to drill a well, better imagine you drill a hole in your wall. Now how do you do that faster? Without changing the machine. You have the same tool, so how do you do that faster? So the actual drilling is not the real problem, is all the supply chain you need for drilling, the change of the drill head, all the stuff between drilling is where you can improve. So the fastest well they've ever drilled took them 10 days. Now the average drilling time is 6 days. So that's not a 400% that we usually hear from Scrum. But if you consider that you cannot improve or increase the velocity of the actual drilling, you have a pretty high improvement in speed here. Okay? And beside of that, and they resolve impediments now in hours. They had situations before when impediment, somebody handed something over to another department as an impediment, and that took them weeks to resolve that. Now they do that in hours because they talk every day. Okay, every day, 15 minutes. We started with that by actually in October, so that's very new. And they already report increased motivation. They reported increased transparency, increased focus, because now they're very clear what are their priorities. And what is interesting, we interviewed them before, so if you were talking to the people on the field, they felt like that people in the head office had no idea what they were doing and the other side around. So if you talk to them now, they actually feel aligned. They feel synchronized between the different locations. So that's, I think, a pretty good result after only a very few months. There are obviously still some challenges left. So they report that until now they sometimes don't have a working product at the end of each sprint. So future challenge would be to make that happen. Another thing, what sometimes happens is that the synchronization is a lot better, but they still have issues, especially on the field and with the head office, and they don't do their refinement very well. So they sometimes use the sprint planning to do their backlog refinement, and then it takes very long, and the result is not so good. So that's what we are working on now, but until now it looks very promising, so I hope that yeah, we can report in the future some more results of that. Thank you. Maybe here from the Vice President a quote. I got that yesterday night, so I just put it in. It was a little longer, so I shortened that a little. But they plan actually to roll out Scrum now in all the other areas, which you can imagine is difficult because remember, cost of change is high. So now we are talking about applying Scrum to topics where you can actually make a lot of expensive mistakes. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. What would you consider the most important thing that happened that you could improve productivity so much?
The impediments. So for example, in order to drill, you need a permit. And that goes to, I don't know, lots of hands. So if they just get stuck somewhere, you might have everything ready, but you cannot start drilling because you don't have the permit. Then you need internally in the organization until that gets to the government, and then once it is the government, you can't do anything. You just wait until you get it back. Another thing, what happens is the supply chain. So they have to synchronize all the different departments. So all the stuff they need to drill is at the moment they need it where they need it. And then remember, there's still an area with security issues. No, Colombia was for more than 50 years in civil war, so you don't just drive there and drop the stuff. You need a lot of security to secure the area, etc. But I think basically the most important thing they do now is they talk every day. And that helps them to clearly see, okay, what's the problem? Why we cannot advance? And they see that now. They can resolve that in hours, and before they didn't even know they had that problem until they wanted to start drilling, and then I know the drill head was not there or something like that.